Coming up on this episode, we're talking about organizational change and learning and development's role in actually making this happen and measuring the results. All this and more on The Perfect Route. Welcome back, viewers and listeners. I'm glad to have a special guest with me today, Gus Prestera. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Thanks. How you doing, Bill?
Great. Introduce yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to.
Yeah, sure. My name is Gus Prestera. I'm an organizational effectiveness consultant, educator, and coach. I work mainly with mid to large size businesses, helping them navigate change or drive change, improve performance, improve retention, employee engagement. So really help them address talent management and talent development related types of needs. Been doing this for, gosh, over 20 years. I don't want to say exactly how long, but, but I've been doing this a while. And I have a great team of people helping me. I run a company called Prestera Effects. I've got instructional designers and developers, graphic designers, data scientists, programmers, all sorts of different folks, kind of all under one roof, one rowdy, crazy roof, uh, where we get together and we help design and build these different solutions for clients. So it's a whole lot of fun. I love working with clients. I love working with different companies and learning about them, learning about different industries and the things that are going on. So I love the variety. I love the challenge of trying to help them with their talent related needs. And I love the collaboration with my team to design and build things. We're builders is what we are, builders at heart. So it kind of doesn't matter what we're building. We just enjoy the process.
That's awesome. I'm all about the adventure and the process myself. And that your website is prosterafx.com.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So people can check out prosterafx.com to see more about what Gus and his team are up to. But let's start at the beginning. What pulled you into the world of learning and development, and how's your perspective on L&D changed over time?
Yeah, so well, like a lot of us, I've fallen into the field. I didn't grow up thinking I would be in workplace learning and development when I was growing up. Um, but I was working in retail of all things. I grew up working in food service. My parents' restaurant started bussing tables when I was 8, did all the things that one does in restaurants, in front and the back and so forth. And so after college, I wanted to go do something totally different. It's like no more food business. And so,
Mhm.
of course, then I went and worked in a pet food business. And so I was a pet food retail manager or management trainee, eventually got to have my own store. And so I was all about managing operations. I was very much an ops guy, yeah, back then. Still am in many ways. But I really love the working with my people, with my team, right, and training them, onboarding them, training them, developing them, dealing. And many of them were high schoolers and college kids, so working with them to, try to motivate them, try to get them to do the right things, show up on time, all that kind of stuff, treat our customers well. And so I enjoyed that part of it. And then what I found was it started to actually pay off in that our stores, my store in particular, did really well in customer service ratings. We had a really high net promoter score, high customer service scores. We had the best inventory control score in the company. Our inventory variance one quarter was less than $100, which
Oh,
was like
wow.
crazy, unheard of. And also the sale of like high margined items, which was one of the ways in which we were evaluated, because it affected the profitability of each store. We were highest in the chain on that. And so as a result, that brought a lot of accolades, but it also brought the opportunity to become a training store. And
Hmm.
so any new managers, assistant managers that were hired in the chain were sent to my store to learn the ropes and learn the secrets of how we did things. And a lot of it just came down to like, you got to hire the right people. You got to onboard them properly so that they're clear on what they need to get done, what the expectations are. Then you got to stay on top of it all the time, right? You have to supervise, you have to give them feedback, you have to encourage them, you have to correct them, right? You have to work with them. And then as new stuff is coming up, you got to train them on it. You got to, make sure that everybody's up to speed and that it's a living organism, this culture that you're building inside of your store. That was the secret sauce. I thought it was pretty obvious that that's what you had to do, but some people thought that was interesting and different. And so later, I had an opportunity because of all that to go into the home office and build a training program for new managers and also new franchisees. And so that got me into the world of instructional design. And that my boss, who was the head of training, he was somebody who had spent many years in training field, had studied it, had a master's degree in it, and so he was able to take me under his wings and teach me a little bit about instructional design. And I really started to enjoy that part of it. It's like I enjoyed the teaching and the training, person to person, but I really started to find I enjoyed developing the designing and developing the materials and stuff on the back end. So so I enrolled. I was in grad school at the time and got my MBA, but I enrolled in the PhD program for instructional systems at Penn State. Went, did that, got my degree, came out, and started doing consulting work. Um, Along the way, I worked at a couple other places like Allen Communication, where we did a lot of e-learning design development.
Mhm.
And so, then I got a different perspective on things. Now kind of getting away from the operational side of a business, getting more into now working with corporate clients. So it's the .com boom at the time. So we were talking, real big fancy dreams about what e-learning could look like someday, adaptive and all that. And so I really enjoyed that part as well. But at some point, I went out on my own, started my own consulting practice called Effect Performance. We're doing a lot of e-learning design and blended learning design, and uh, and one of the things that I tried to do there was kind of bring my own unique flavor to it, which is this focus on performance. Right, it came from that operational background, so to me, like the learning is nice. I went to school learning. I enjoyed learning, but in the workplace, to me, learning needs to have a value, a performance value to it that has to translate into something that helps the business. Otherwise, why is the business investing the time, money, and effort into it? So I tried to make sure that all the programs that we designed and built were very performance focused, and that started with business goals, worked their way backwards into ultimately instructional goals that help drive the learning. And what that meant was that our courses were much less likely to just be courses in the traditional sense, but courses that had a lot of case studies in them, a lot of problems to solve, real world scenarios, all that kind of stuff was baked into the design because we were trying to get people to really be able to apply what they were learning on the job. And that again, I thought that was kind of obvious. Some people thought that was kind of new and different. This idea of contextualizing learning and making it very job relevant and so forth, and application and transfer, all these things that just seem like duh.
Mhm.
But as I started to look around, I started to see that it's not the norm. It's not what you see every day. That a lot of learning and development product output is not like that. It is very decontextualized, very removed from the application and the transfer context, and it's just content, just standalone content, stripped of all context. And that more and more, that's what we're producing and putting out into the world. And so as my consulting practice grew and I started working more and more with content from other places, from other vendors, I started to develop strategies for how we could take what they were producing, which is decontextualized, and how we could take that and work those into programs in a way that was more contextualized, where we would fill in for what they're lacking, right? We would form the connective tissue in a program, in a learning and development program, to make sure that we were achieving business goals, even while they were focused on their very specific, finite instructional goal. So,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's kind of how I evolved. And of course, then learning and development's taken me into a lot of other areas, change enablement, sales enablement, helping HR with things like recruiting and interviewing processes and onboarding processes, moving into leadership development and helping to develop emerging leaders, current leaders, hypo identification and development. So it's really opened a lot of doors over the years to come at it not only from an instructional design background, but an instructional design background that's informed by understanding of the business and all the things that are needed to make the business more successful.
Thank you for all that detail. It's been a fascinating journey for you.
Yeah.
And there's so much that is resonating with me, and I'm sure will hit home with our listeners and viewers too. Speaking about some of those initiatives that you've seen, what's one of them that you think truly captured strategic potential for learning and development in companies?
Yeah, but well, probably the most strategic stuff that I've worked on. I mean, some of the leadership development work we've done has been very strategic, but the change enablement, supporting organizational change efforts, and that's not a one person job. It's not a one department job. There may be one person, one department that's leading the charge on an organizational change. Um, but it really takes a team effort, and this is a place where I think L&D, if we're thinking strategically and we're thinking like business people, where we have real big opportunities to help, especially now given all the change that's going on. But I'll just give you one example of a really messy, complex organizational change related to culture. So a client, large company, global client, a global company was their CEO was kind of getting tired of the fact that they developed these core values for the company a couple years beforehand. Everybody agreed to them. They put them up on the wall. They painted them on the wall at every office, every building, right? Posters, flyers, everything you could want. It's all out there, right? To see every day. But people were not living into those values. He would see it every day in the behavior of the senior leadership team, of middle managers, the kinds of problems that were emerging where people just were not being respectful to each other, not being collaborative, not being innovative. The kinds of things that you would expect, probably many core value statements in organizations, they were just getting trampled every day. So, he finally got frustrated and said, we need to do something. You need to start living into these values. What are we going to do? And so the head of HR, head of communications, head of L&D, they all kind of put their heads together and came up with this idea that they were going to more than just do a communication out to the field, more than just a couple of sort of symbolic things. They were going to put together a real change initiative, multi-year, that was going to really embed these values and the behaviors associated with them into the lives of every worker everywhere, every day. And that's a big deal. So, um, because it's one thing to teach everybody what respect is and what it means. It's another to actually get them to exhibit the behaviors every day, and to know what it looks like when it's bad, and to call it out, and to have a culture where that can happen. Um, and so, from an L&D standpoint, this was a great opportunity for us to come in and show that we could be strategic with the best of them, right? That we could earn our seat at the table. And so we came up with so I worked with the head of L&D. I wasn't the head of L&D, but I was supporting him. And we came up with a strategy where we would develop change ambassadors. We would have a
Mhm.
program to train and certify change ambassadors. So not so much teach them about the values, because the people selected for this to be ambassadors would be individuals who already lived the values. So we wanted to take those folks who are the exemplars and amplify them, right? And to say, everybody, we want more people to do what these folks are doing in the organization, and we wanted them to go out and evangelize the values, and then to provide support for the managers, the people managers who sometimes struggled with what these things meant and how to apply them, how to use them. So we trained them on how to peer mentor other managers on how they could work with their teams and with individuals. And we trained them on change management. So we turned each of them into a change catalyst in and of themselves, a change agent that we could push out into the organization. Into every part of it, every site, every department, every functional area had change ambassadors out in the field deployed, doing this work, right? So it wasn't just the HR department and the L&D department trying to do all this ourselves. We enlisted, right? We enlisted people in the business who understood the business to help carry some of the load. Um, in making this happen. And then we supported all that by, in addition to the training and certifying these ambassadors, we then provided them with toolkits that they could use to go and work with the managers one on one, or even facilitate little workshops with different departments. We gave them everything they need, like a meeting in a kit, basically, meeting in a
Mhm.
box kind of thing. Because that's what they asked for, right? We asked them, what kinds of tools, resources do you need? What would be helpful for you in bringing this vision about? And they told us what they needed, and we went out and we built it, right? And then gave them the resources they needed. We also gave them we also created a self-assessment instrument that was rolled out to the whole organization. So when 3,000 people completed a self-assessment online and received a report that helped them self-evaluate on where they were relative to those values. You know, where are you strongest in showing these values? Where are you not so strong? And then those could act as catalysts for conversations that they would have with their manager, either around performance review time or just as part of their day-to-day coaching conversations. And then we could provide reporting to the managers on how their team looked, right? So your team over here in this quality assurance group within this site, you know, this, the makeup of your team might have 10, 15 people in it, and here's where they're strongest as a group. You know, they may be really strong over here in credibility, and attention to detail, but very weak in empathy, or collaboration, right? And so we gave those kinds of reports to the managers so that they had something to work with,
Mhm.
right? Now they had a toolkit, they've got an assessment, they've got some reports, they've got an ambassador that they can lean on for help. Now they can actually do the work, the hard work of working with their teams to try to embed these behaviors day in, day out. And it put a lot of pressure on those managers because it's like you're out of excuses now, right? You, you said
Mhm.
you needed help. We've given you all the help in the world. Now you got to go and deliver. And they did, and they did. And we said we tracked a number of different metrics, that showed that the behaviors were improving, and the CEO could pop in, and see that the behaviors were improving gradually. Not the same across the whole organization, not in every country, but he could see where it was getting better, where it wasn't, and we could then take some corrective action into places where there just wasn't uptake, you know. And instead of bombarding everybody with everything, we could be more precise about where we directed our resources because we were measuring and we were following the data where it was
Mhm.
telling. So those are things that I don't see a lot of L&D departments do, but I think those are the kinds of things that if you're trying to support change, you have to do. You have to get close to the business. You have to understand their business. You have to respect the native intelligence that exists inside of those businesses. That there are people in those businesses who really know what they're doing, and there are examples of people doing it well. And we need to find those folks who are doing it well. We need to amplify that, rather than assume, you know, hey, we need to teach everybody resilience. Let's assume nobody knows anything about resilience. Let's teach
Mhm.
everybody resilience. Let's treat them all like they're fifth grade resilience learners, and we'll spray and pray, right? We won't measure anything. We won't ask for what they need. We're just going to hit them with training, right? And that doesn't work. Um, and that's part of why, you know, we don't really get much attention and a seat at the table when those conversations are being had about driving real change in an organization, um, because they don't think that we have answers to that question. And we do. We just maybe sometimes are scared to bring those up. Um, but in this case, we weren't scared, you know. And the head of L&D asked me, "It's like, tell me for real, what do we need to do?" And I told him, "You're not going to like the answer." He's like, "Well, tell me anyway." I'm like, well, here's if you're serious about change, here are the things that we need to do, you know. And then we were able to really have a good conversation, and we were able to bring really strong recommendations back to the head of HR, and the CEO and the head of communications, and we were able to hash it out. But we earned ourselves a seat at the table by really thinking like business people.
Mhm. And thanks again for that very detailed overview and description of what you were trying to do both strategically and operationally to move the organization forward on a pretty challenging change initiative. Um,
It was. It was.
yeah.
And not without resistance, of course, right? Everybody
Mhm.
thinks they're doing well. Everybody thinks they're being respectful. Everybody thinks they're collaborative. It's Bill over there who's not being collaborative. I'm very collaborative, right?
Mhm.
Everybody. So it was challenging to get people to lower their defenses, and it wasn't going to happen by HR just preaching at them, or
No,
L&D
no.
just preaching at them, right? That wasn't going to get them to lower their defenses. They needed some safety, the safe space where they could be honest with each other, right, and lower their defenses and start getting to a point where it's like, okay, maybe I think I am good at collaboration, but maybe I could get a little better. It looks like as a team we're not great at it. How about we put our heads together and come up with some ways of getting better at it, and come up with a game plan? And by the
Mhm.
way, those game plans that they came up with, the ambassadors would help them come up with change plans with each of the different departments. That information was then fed back to L&D, to HR. The CEO could have a glimpse at, what's the change plan for this site in Mumbai, um, in their packaging division, and he could go in and take a look at that team's plan for what they were going to do to get better at collaboration. So the back and forth, between the business and the corporate, the head office, nobody likes to recognize that there is a big chasm there, but there really is. And I think one of your previous speakers spoke about how leadership oftentimes has no clue what's going on in the organization.
Mhm.
Uh, we try to remedy that by creating some transparency back and forth between the two, getting dialogue happening between the two, and visibility. If you can get some dialogue and visibility, um, you can start to break down some of that divide.
Yeah. And that that's so important because as you mentioned earlier, there's going to be resistance to change.
Yeah,
Change is scary.
it is.
It's difficult to implement. Um, what are some of the most underdeveloped areas or biggest gaps that you see in employee learning programs, and how should we find and address them?
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of it goes back to again my perspective as somebody who looks at things from through the eyes of the business, as a business owner and as a business person. Uh, is that focus on, what are we ultimately trying to accomplish with an L&D program? um, and so often, so I'd say it's the goals, the fuzzy goals are still a huge problem. They've been a problem for a long time. I think they continue to be a huge problem in our field. The other is the lack of pull through across uh, programs, the curricula. We design things as a bunch of modular blocks because it's convenient, it's efficient, it's productive, right? We talk now about bite-sized pieces, right? All that's great, but there has to be a stringing together of all those bite-sized pieces, or the build big blocks, or however you're building your curriculum or program. You have to tie it all together for folks, and help them see the whole rather than just this one little nugget. If you're going to have a program at all, otherwise, don't bother building a whole program if you're just going to have a bunch of separate individual pieces. And I'll give you an example of working with a client on their early career development program. So prior to our getting there, they developed a 2-year long program where somebody, let's say they're fresh out of college and they come to this company, they go through orientation or onboarding, and then their manager can enroll them into this early career development program. And on the face of it, the program is all about um, helping them transition from being a college student to being now in the corporate workplace, right? Change of scenery, the expectations, the technologies, the tools we use are different. The way we go about things are different. It's not like working on a project team in your senior seminar class. So, so teaching them how to act like business people inside of these organizations. And that's cool. Um,
Mhm.
and first of all, it's cool that they even did this. So I got to give them credit for even caring about wanting to create a program for these folks coming out of college. Wonderful. Um, it, then I asked them why. why, what's the business rationale for it? And they would come, well, employer of choice, right? We want to be employer of choice. It's going to help us with recruiting, campus recruiting, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, that's great. Um, and then, but as far as the actual program itself, because you could have a 3 month or 6 month program or 1 year program, call it early career development program, and you accomplish the same thing from a perception PR standpoint as you would with a 2 or 3 year long program. Um, and they're saying, no, but we also want to teach them these skills. Great. When I look at the program, though, I open it up, and what I see is a bunch of like seminars, webinars, sorry, that were done maybe every 2 3 weeks. They'd have a different webinar, sometimes in person, sometimes webinars, um, and there were some e-learning modules for people to complete, um, and that goes on for 2 years.
Hmm.
And then the occasional touch point where the program manager would meet with all of them, um, just to kind of talk, just to chat. Uh, I'm like, that's nice. But like, where, where, uh, where is the expectation that they're going to use any of these things that they're learning in class, right? In these webinars, if they learned about time management, right? Is there any follow through on that to help them make sure that they actually change the way they do their time management so they get a little more productive, right? They're not using the post-it note method or whatever. And they're like, no. They're like, well, what about this? And what about no? so, so there was, you've invested all this money into a 2 year long program, brought in all these different vendors, a whole cadre of vendors that come in and deliver all these great sessions, popular. Everybody loved them, good content, but no follow through. So for 2 years, this is happening. And by the way, we were brought in to create a third year capstone experience where they would pull all the skills together now and engage in a real world assignment, working in groups, doing all this great stuff. And that's great. If there were some skills that we could build on for this capstone activity, that would be great. But we were like, but what skills can we actually count on them having if they haven't really been practicing any of this stuff for 2 years? So it's almost as if they just walked in the door, and we're kind of starting from nothing. You could just have the capstone experience happen on day one instead of on at the beginning of their third year. But that's very common. I see that in hypo identification or hypo development programs, leadership development programs, emerging leader programs, where it's just vendor after vendor, module after module, e-learning, webinar, in person, whatever, some combination, and then it all comes to a close at some point with nothing connecting any of that. And that to me is that's a shame. So the companies that are doing it well, they're focusing on the pull through, right? They're saying, okay, the vendor's got some content, it's good content. Now, what do I have to do as an L&D person to say, we're going to pull that content through, get people applying it, talking about it, discussing how they can use it in their day-to-day lives, come up with a plan for what they're going to implement, how they're going to implement it, then debrief on it, have some reflection, right? Let's have the assumption, the expectation as well that people are going to do something with this, and let's be curious about what they're doing with it. Let's measure it. Let's see if their managers feel like they're seeing any sort of change in them as they're going through this program, or are we just doing this to make people happy? And that goes back to the goals, right? A lot of times our goals are kind of palliative goals,
Hmm.
where we design a program around the idea of being employer of choice, of making people happy, trying to retain them longer. Like it's about feeling good. Um, and that lasts for a little while, but then at some point when the money gets tight, the business leaders start to say, where do we cut? Well, this thing, that's just there to make people feel nice. We can get rid of that because that's not a business need, right? And slash, slash, slash,
Hmm.
right? And we see all these beautiful programs torn up, thrown out, washed up, sunsetted because there's no support from the business. If anything, the business people are happy. It's like, cool, I don't have to send that person to that program anymore. So I can work them harder. Right. So the manager, if they weren't seeing value from it, all they were seeing is the fact that they were losing that person for some amount of hours every year, to the L&D department's whims. Um, and now they don't have to worry about that. So that's a shame when the business feels that way, and the managers feel that way, that they're not getting an ROI. So cutting it isn't a big deal. If anything, it helps me. And uh, that's a shame. So I start from that feeling. I don't want to feel that way. And that motivates me to say from the beginning, no, really, what is the value to the business?
Hmm.
What's the value to a manager to enroll their person in this early career development program? What's in it for them?
Right.
Is it if we can give them back somebody who's, more efficient or better at collaborating, better at using the company's technology and resources, knows the company inside and out, knows who all the experts are and where to go to for what, knows the business processes better, as a result of going through this program, then there's some real value there, and they're not going to want to get rid of this program, because how else would they get it, that
Hmm.
value?
Yeah.
And they would
Yeah.
feel it. And so I think the programs that I've built that have lasted 10, 15 years, um, the ones I'm most proud of are the ones where we had real business goals, concrete
Hmm.
business goals, and we had a lot of support from the business units and from the managers who were sending their people into the programs. They were the most enthusiastic about it. And we knew that if the company tried to cut those programs, those managers would stand up and defend it. And that I think we should strive for that.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's not just having a program that's popular, it's having a program that's valuable with
Yeah, yeah,
the metrics to back it up. If
that's right.
you'd mentioned ROI, what are some other metrics or signals that you think that matter most to senior executive teams?
Yeah, well, so it's different for different industries, different businesses. When I worked in food service, we were concerned about turning over our tables. We were the ticket, the price per guest, right? And maximizing that by selling desserts and alcohol and all the other
Mhm.
stuff to try to upcharge a bill. We were concerned with that. Um, we were concerned with repeat business, right? So we measured that kind of stuff as best we could. Uh, in retail, same thing. There are certain things that drive profitability more than others, and so we know certain products have higher margins, and so we measure the sale of higher margin items relative to lower margin items. Inventory turns is important, right? Because the longer you keep merchandise on the shelf, that's money that's sitting there tied up, just sitting on the shelves. You got product that's not as fresh. It's all sorts of bad things. So you care about inventory turns. And so when I was very close to the business in my early days, right, when I lived in the business, or even in the home office, but still very focused on the business, I was really concerned about those kinds of metrics, right? And I would have constant conversations with the chief, the COO, about what are the things that you guys are looking at. What's hot right now, what's important, what's falling off, and then we would immediately design programs, or interventions, or even sometimes just go out and do some coaching, to try to address a particular gap, and really focus on delivering value for the business so that they could see immediately an ROI from having engaged with the training department. And I think we sometimes lose track of that. Um, and the more removed we are from the business, the more we start to think that what matters is, what percentage of the courses have people completed, and how many hours of training have they completed. The talent acquisition team, they focus on their fill rate, right? They focus on internal process metrics, and because those are the things they have the most control over, and they feel like that's something I can be held accountable for. But uh, I think you think of it as like from the perspective of a business person. I don't care what you think you should be held accountable for.
Mhm.
What is the business on the hook for, right? What makes or breaks the success of the business? And if, for example, with sales training, if you're working with a business where they're really trying to drive new prescriptions, right? New RX is their metric right now, and that's the thing they're most concerned with. I wouldn't be doing my job right if I was the head of sales training and I wasn't thinking about every day how I can drive new prescriptions. Right? It's not just the sales rep's job or the regional sales manager's job or the national sales director's job. Me as the head of sales training, I got to be thinking about how can I contribute to that. I know I can't do it by myself, but how can I give them all the tools they need, enable them to be successful at it? Right? What can I do? And that should be what's driving me instead of saying, okay, how many onboarding classes are we going to put on the calendar this year, and how are we going to do this, and how many modules are up for review for compliance review for updates. Yeah, all that stuff's important for operationally, but that's not what's going to make or break your department. It's so the closer you get to the business to understanding what business metrics are driving their decision making today, um, and the more that you align what you're doing with that, the better. You know, and I think then you can make better decisions about how to spend your time and money when you are prioritizing the business needs. When you're not, I think it's very easy to sort of take flights of fancy and say, I'd really want to build a program an emerging leader program, a 2-year long emerging leader program that blah, 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 blah. And you start putting everything into it. And it's like, well, but why again? Why are we doing all that?
Hmm.
um, and then a lot of times the goals are fuzzy. It's like, well, because it'll improve retention, employee satisfaction, and blah blah blah. And okay, that's nice, but are the business leaders really going to be supportive because we're addressing something that's keeping them up at night, or are we just doing something that makes us feel good,
Right.
or that we think is good long term for the business? I think more of a balance would be good, because I do think sometimes the business is too focused on day to day stuff and they got their heads down in new RXs.
Hmm.
and we can sometimes come and help them and understand that, longer term, if you're developing your people and you have higher job satisfaction, higher employee engagement turns into higher productivity, all that turns into high RX, high new RX. And if you're able to retain people longer, your top performers longer, all that will translate into better numbers for you. But sometimes it'll take a while for that to happen. In the meanwhile, there may be other shorter term solutions and other interventions that I can bring to bear, take them out of my toolkit here, and bring them to bear on the short term to help you address what's keeping you up at night, which is driving new RX sales. Um, right. And then that earns me some trust and credibility with the business to be able to, when I say to them, trust me, 6 months to a year down the road, you're going to feel the effects of this emerging leader program.
Right.
Maybe they'll take your word for it. Maybe they won't, but you at least tried to earn um, uh, that leap of faith that they need to make, because that's what a lot of development is, especially leadership development. Right? We know it takes a long time, and organizations are moving so fast, and they're under so much. Business leaders are under so much pressure. It's a lot to ask them to make an investment now that will pay off 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, when they don't even know if they're going to be in the company in 2 years down the road,
Hmm.
right? So it's a big ask, and if we're only asking for that kind of stuff, it causes them to tune out and say, okay, L&D is not listening. They're tone deaf. They're talking about stuff for 3 years down. I have this problem today. And so, yeah, I do think sometimes we in L&D um, are, when it comes to what we focus on, we focus too much on fuzzy goals, fuzzy metrics, and things that are very long term, and not enough on what are the things that are operationally driving the business and from a profitability and revenue perspective, cost containment, those things that are really top of mind for business leaders. That's what they're being beaten on with sticks about every
Hmm.
day, right?
Yeah.
And we in HR are protected from that. We're in a protective bubble, or we have been. That protective bubble maybe isn't quite so protective anymore,
Right.
because of AI and all the things that are going on. even that protective bubble may be breaking down, and we may start to now feel what a lot of the other business units and functions feel, which is this drive for productivity. You know, uh, the CEO shaking everybody by the shoulder and say, "Stop it! I just need you to make a profit.
Mhm.
Get me a new product that makes profit." Right? Stop talking about all these other things. Um, and so that they may start to lose patience with us, and I feel like this is starting to happen.
That you raised some really good points. Any closing thoughts for our listeners and viewers, guys?
Yeah, is I had the good fortune of starting off being in the business as a business person, as a manager, and then moving into L&D. And so I was able to bring that with me. And I went out and got an MBA, and I think and talk like a business person. But for people who have not, who kind of come in from other areas, maybe you were a teacher and you moved into L&D, or you're an artist and you moved into L&D, or you started off as a psychology major and right into HR. You just may not have had that exposure to business and business thinking. But I encourage all of you, all of us, because I'm still working on it myself, is to really focus on the business, understanding the business deeply. If you think you understand it, think I need to go even deeper. I need to really get to know the people who run the business, the people who, where the rubber meets the road, the frontline workers. What are they doing day in, day out? What are the challenges on the front line? What are the challenges on the back end? I really need to understand it in order to be effective in working with business leaders and talking, not just using their language, but also empathizing with them and understanding where they're coming from and their pain points are, and being able to translate that into then um, HR and L&D goals that are much more closely aligned with those business needs. And be able to marry them, fuse them, um, blend them together, rather than have them feel so disjointed from each other.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's something we can all do. It just takes a little bit of determination to spend the time understanding the business, spend the time in the business. My old boss, when he first got there, the head of L&D in that pet supply retail chain, the reason I met him was because he came to work. He came to be trained in my store. The COO also, when he was hired, he came and was trained in my store. He learned the operations of the stores working in my store. I was his trainer.
Mhm.
And then he later hired me, right, to be a trainer in the home office. But it was the point is, like, they both recognized the importance of getting down into the weeds where the or the rubber meets the road, I guess, is the better better metaphor, and really understand what's going on, so that they could do their jobs more effectively. And I think we all need to try to do that as best we can, even though some of the things that are going on in our organizations seem really alien to us. You got people over here working on IT stuff that just seems way out there. You got folks over here working on finance stuff I can never possibly understand. Right? They're working on mergers and acquisitions. What the heck do I know about that? Maybe I can go learn a little bit. So in addition to learning about our stuff, our discipline, and learning about AI, I think we also have to keep learning about the business, to keep that front and center, so that we don't get disconnected. And if we get disconnected, we just are making ourselves easier to be separated from the business.
Mhm. Wonderful thoughts. Thanks for sharing your experience and everything that we've discussed today, Gus. It's been a pleasure having you on. Remember, presterafx.com for more information about the offerings that Gus and his teammates have for your organization. I'm Dr. Bill Sodeman, and take a look for our next episode as we take another step on the perfect route.